Good morning, it's Brendon, the Technology Concierge. Today I'm joined by Ira Vouk. She's the author of Hospitality 2.0, and if you haven't read it, I would certainly encourage you to do so. I've been in the industry for a long time, but I learned so much in reading it. She's a hospitality technology consultant. She's a founder of a revenue management company, a speaker and lecturer. Ira, welcome today.
Thank you so much, Brendon, for having me. I'm really excited and looking forward to this productive discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Ira, when I read the book, as I mentioned just off camera, the first thing that really stuck out to me is obviously we know hotels lag behind in technology. We hear it all the time. But why is it that hotels lag behind in technology? And what is it that we can do about it?
Really great question. One of my favorite questions, in fact. And I agree with you that in the industry, we always talk about it. We're like, okay, why are we in this stone age? Why are we second to last after hunting, as Max Starkov mentioned, in terms of digitization of the industries, right? Other different sectors are other different industries. What is it about our specific industry that is so different that just prevents us from scaling and from scaling this technology solution and from adopting them in, I guess, more optimal manner? And when I was writing my book, I did a thorough research and I spoke to a lot of industry leaders and analyzed the market. One of the reasons that is mentioned in the book is like the natural curve of technology adoption, that people in general are just not really, they're not rushing to adopt new technology. But even though I do use this as one of the reasons in my book, I don't think that's really one of the main reasons in our industry, because we see technology and AI and ML everywhere in our lives. We as humans have been able to adopt crazy things like almost self-driving cars. Like I literally, when I drive, I just do this. I'm like on Facebook all the time. My car drives for me. And as humans, we're actually pretty flexible in terms of technology adoption in our daily lives. So I don't really buy it as the main reason for preventing tech adoption in our industry. I personally believe that the main reason is because our industry is very specific when it comes to the composition of the industry and how it's structured. And it's just very fragmented. And as you also mentioned during our previous conversation, when you hear that, oh, we're just like the airline industry, it's our sister industry, it's in the travel space, why can't we be like them? Why are they ahead of us in many ways when it comes to revenue management, yield management, and tech adoption, and booking engine, and AI implementations, and whatnot? Well, we're not. We're very different. And how we're different is that because of what we call, and not a lot of people actually realize that, but this three-legged stool situation that is one of the aspects of this fragmentation is something that makes this the composition of the industry very complex and very controversial, I would say. So the fact that we have these three stakeholders in pretty much any decision-making process when it comes to tech adoption, we have the owner, we have the management company, and we have the brand. And again, they're independent properties, so brands are not always involved. Hotel management companies are not always involved, but in many cases, there are these three stakeholders that have very different interests. And as a tech vendor, as an investor, as an executive of a technology company, you don't really realize that when you get into our space. As we also know, which is, I've actually added this in my head as one of additional factors for low technology adoption, which is not in the book, but I'm going to describe that here during this podcast. The 99% of these tech vendors, the founders and executives and even employees in those companies, are not from the industry originally. So when they invest, when they start these companies, when they build their products, they have no idea what they're dealing with. And I was in those shoes when I co-founded my RMS company when it was 12 years ago. We were the first RMS system that had machine learning built in, and the first system that was targeting mid-scale and limited service properties that was fully automated and had very seamless interface and very user-friendly interface. So I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I didn't understand all those things, the integration dependencies and all these decision-making stakeholders that were participating in this process, I had to educate myself. So the problem is that majority of these vendors, they don't understand it. And it's a big problem. And I think that's why we need to do, we need to publish more of these educational podcasts and content online to explain how our industry is structured and how to deal with that. Not saying that, okay, this is it, and it's just there's no way around it, and it's just not going to evolve from now on because we have the situation, but there are ways to work with these different stakeholders and adapt your product offering and your go-to-market strategy accordingly. And you will be just more optimal if you understand the situation. And I'm actually working on building an online course that will be targeted specifically to technology vendors to explain them what the industry is about and how to build and bring the products to market to make sure that they're targeted towards the end user, and then the companies understand who the end users are, who the personas are, and how to build their go-to-market strategy. And that will essentially also help technology adoption because the end user will be able to relate to these products better and will be able to just adopt them easier because they will be specifically carved towards their needs, as opposed to what we're seeing right now when a real estate person or finance person comes in and they build something that is absolutely unusable and they don't understand why this product is not scaling. So I would say that was probably the main reason why our industry is very, very behind when it comes to technology adoption, especially technology like AI, machine learning, and blockchain and whatnot. So those kind of upper levels of tech evolution. And another reason is just that the industry in general is very conservative. It's one of the oldest industries. So along with education, healthcare, we are people that have traditionally been embracing, again, I keep using that term, we've been embracing high touch. And we just think that if we use high tech, we can't be high touch, which is, I think that's definitely a misconception because high tech can make you be much more efficient and provide better high touch service and improve customer satisfaction, customer retention, and help with customer acquisitions, not just be more profitable or efficient, but actually target customer satisfaction and positively improve it. So technology can just do so much for us. We don't have to be afraid of it. And with COVID, we've definitely seen increased adoption rates, but there is just so much more that we as an industry can do in terms of making our tools better, technology tools, and then also from the user standpoint, adopting those tools and understanding the use cases and ROI that is associated with it.
Yeah, that's great. Really a good point you made there, Ira. I think that as an industry, there's still the perception that high tech and high touch cannot actually, work together. And I'm totally with you. And I think the labor shortage that we're now seeing, along obviously with the pandemic, is forcing us to look at that. And I feel that we can use technology to literally streamline the operation, to allow the existing team members to actually offer an even higher touch, environment or experience to the guests. So I don't think we should be afraid of technology. It doesn't replace people. It actually allows us as an industry, I think, to enhance our high touch experience.
Totally.
Ira, cloud technology, once again, as an industry, we've been a little bit behind in adoption, but we're really now starting to take off. Do you think that is actually going to help us, leap forward as far as technology goes? Because just as an example, I think, Accor now globally have said, rather than the group having to standardize on one PMS, which was always extremely difficult to achieve, if not impossible, there are 8 PMSs that the properties can choose from. And I think now the use of products like middleware to help, the PMS and the CRS, Central Reservation System, talk together is probably a step forward. Do you see that happening?
I think you kind of touched on 2 different aspects here. So the fact that the choice between having one standardized solution across the whole portfolio or having multiple systems to choose from is a different discussion from whether we should or should not adopt cloud solutions and in general what they do for us. So I would like to separate those two. So let's start with the cloud technology. I have a whole lecture on it when I teach it clearly at San Diego State, right? And I have an entire lecture dedicated just to cloud computing and to cloud solutions to explain students what it is and why it's beneficial and why this is not the future. This is our reality, our real life. Logically, we should not have a single property that is still using premise-based software. However, realistically, half of the hotel properties, lodging, I would say, properties in the world still use legacy systems. There are various reasons for that. In fact, in some countries, which I discovered, I have clients in Turkey, which I do consulting for. It's a hotel group. And their situation is that their government is not allowing them to use cloud solutions because they are not allowing the data to go out of the country. They have to use premise-based solutions with data sitting on their servers in the back office. This is their reality. And he says, Ira, you write those wonderful things in your book, but we can't use any of that, any of those solutions because we just, it's legally not allowed. So there are situations when, this is one of the reasons why the world is not developing at the same pace. But in the countries where that's not an issue, we still have many companies that haven't adopted cloud solutions. And in many cases, that's, and not only PMS, but there are other different components of tech stack that might be still sitting on somebody's servers in somebody's garage or in the back office. And the reason is because the larger the company, the harder it is to transition to an upgraded tech stack and the more money it takes to invest. So the older the company is, the larger the company is, the higher the chances are that they still sit on old stack. Many of them use DOS-based systems still. So it doesn't make any sense to me as a technologist, but this is our reality and this is still happening. And we're still battling with that through education and awareness and other things. And we're moving in the right direction, but that's still our reality. The benefits of cloud computing. So compared to, first of all, there is a significant financial benefit. This is the rule number one, or the reason number one why hotel companies should consider investing in it, because the old school premise-based solutions would cost you, a subscription or a license would cost you tens of thousands of dollars. With the development of cloud computing, it's a matter of hundreds of dollars per month. And they normally have the per room model where they price depending on the size of the property. And it's literally just a matter of, there is no initial investment. In many cases, you don't even pay an upfront fee for the installation. It's just online recurring fee based on SaaS model, which is much more optimal and profitable for your operations as a hotel company or an individual hotel than it would be for you to have to invest multiple thousands and tens of thousands of dollars upfront, plus the ongoing maintenance fee, which is even larger than the subscription fee from the SaaS model. So the costs, and also the cost benefits for the companies that do transition to cloud computing software is just much less. It costs much less in terms of the data storage, maintenance fees, and other fees that are associated with managing an entire server room and other things. It's just much cheaper to outsource that to AWS or CDP and utilize those tools. And if you need more data and more computing power, it automatically increases. If you need less, it automatically decreases. It's just flexible and much more cost effective and much less expensive. So that's number one. Number two is security, safety of your data. It's a big misconception that if I have my data in my closet on the physical computer, it's safe there. No, it's not. It's actually much more vulnerable than delegating it to the security of your data to people who know what to do with it. Experts in companies like Google or Amazon or Microsoft, they understand how to deal with it and how to make sure it's secured. And then continuous evolution and development of those software tools, as opposed to if you have a premise-based piece of software, not mentioning any specific names, but I remember when we had one update every 5 years for our PMS system, we had version 1.7 from that was upgraded from 1.6 previously installed 5 years ago. And somebody had to actually come into the property, stick their USB drive into the computer or download something and install something. So that's much longer process, and it's just more cumbersome and takes more time. That's why it's much less frequent. Then you become legacy real quick. Your functionality becomes outdated. If you're in the cloud, if you use solutions that are in the cloud, I worked for companies that literally published new code every week. Like literally every week they had a new version of software, and it was always either bug fixes or new functionality that customers would benefit from. So you continuously develop, continuously evolve, which you obviously can't do with premise-based. So the benefits of cloud solutions are numerous. It still, again, doesn't make any sense to me why we're not the entire industry is there already in the cloud. But again, our reality is that there are still many companies that are using premise-based systems and probably will be for a while. We just need to do more education and raising more awareness about these cloud-based solutions. But next thing you know, there will be metaverse, and then cloud will be outdated, but there will still be companies using premise-based, DOS-based software systems in our industry.
Then they can skip directly to metaverse from on-premise, potentially.
Amen to that. Hopefully they will.
No, that's an interesting point. Statistically, I would guess that probably in Australia, we're still 70, 80% on-premise. Yeah, it is that high, particularly across the larger groups. There's some independent properties, they have the luxury of being a little bit more flexible, and they have taken advantage of cloud-based. And as you said, it's just a matter of cost. The upfront cost is minimal. The training, they're normally much more intuitive. So training and installation costs are normally not part of the equation. And with a lot of the solutions we see as well, as they are as software as a service, and it's a monthly fee. So if for any point, you close a hotel for a 1-year refurbishment or something, you can literally, stop paying the monthly fee and then pick it up again once the refurbishment's done. So much more flexibility than an on-premise solution.
Absolutely. And you also, just one more comment, you also mentioned, you touched on the topic of, branded hotels and larger hotel companies being slower to adopt this. It's also one of the problems in our industry that, as I mentioned, the larger the company it is, the harder it is for them to upgrade. That's why we have this, the situation kind of flipped. Previously, 40 years ago, when brands became strong, they were innovative. They were able to provide modern technology for their franchisees, for the owners and operators. But now, 40 years later, they haven't really been up to speed on the modern technology, and it flipped towards independent properties having access to modern tech, and that is much more innovative than what brands are using. Again, because as you mentioned, they're just more flexible. It's easier for Citizen M hotel that has 30 properties, or sorry if I'm not remembering something like that. Yeah. Or, a smaller company, or, maybe a company that has 2-3 hotels in their portfolio, to switch to a newer property management system that is cloud native, that has newer functionality, a bunch of integrations and seamless user-friendly interface that doesn't require any training. Like literally, there should be no things that you did for your, for many years in your career. There shouldn't be any more trainers of a PMS system, because it should be so user-friendly. I used one of the technology solutions that is targeting independent providers, independent hoteliers, with one of my classes for the students, and I just told them, okay, one by one, go to the computer and just figure out how to check a person in without any training. They just saw this system for the first time. They went in, took them 20 seconds to check a person in. Wow. Then the next person, okay, go and change the price for tomorrow for single queen. They went to the computer and changed the price within 30 seconds. And then the next person, okay, go make a reservation, took a minute. So this is how the new modern technology should look like. There shouldn't be extensive training. So unfortunately, right now we have this disbalance between the software that is available for independent operators and the software that is available for franchisees that are part of larger brands. And hopefully this will the gap starts shrinking as we talk more about it, and we see some companies really making progress in the direction of larger companies making progress in adopting their technology. But at the same time, it's it's a safe choice for them to sign with Oracle or Sabre, those companies that are also large and they're doing wonderful things, but they're also legacy companies that are not as innovative as a startup. Large brand would probably never sign up with startup that was born 2 years ago. Very rare cases. So it's interesting to see how we keep evolving and whether that gap starts shrinking or possibly not between the brands and independent operators.
I think that we will start to see that the gap will shrink because, as we mentioned before, I think Accor is quite forward in their approach that, allow the property to choose from a number of property management systems. I think that's certainly a step in the right direction.
Yeah, Accor is doing great things. I mean, I really applauded them when they made that decision. I think that's a great choice, but I don't know if it will be followed by larger brands. And Accor is a relatively small company compared to, Wyndham and Joyce and Marriott and others. And it's going to be harder for them to adopt the same strategy, I think, because especially, at least when it comes to the PMS, CRS portion of their tech stack, because you have to keep in mind that they need to integrate all that into their tech stack. And there's still no API standardization, regardless of all the efforts by HT&G for many, many years. API standards are still a big mess. Data standards are still a big mess. And if you have a portfolio of thousands of properties and you need to integrate 8 different PMS systems, that is going to be a nightmare that will last about 5 years. And because their databases are also old and they're sitting, in a table format, and it's just also probably sitting on on the server in somebody's garage. So it's going to be very difficult for other companies to do the same what Accor did, and I doubt they will make that choice, but we'll see. It will be interesting to see what happens.
It'll be interesting to watch. Ira, the next question is with regards to education. One of the things that I read in the book, I think, is that as an industry, are we doing enough to make sure that we are, in a sense, setting the syllabus for the students that are actually, going to be the future leaders? What are your thoughts on that?
This is one of my favorite topics because now I have been diving into the education. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for asking great questions. Education is my passion, and I've been doing that in kind of different aspects for many, many years. So I think we also have to differentiate between formal education, where you obtain a specific, hospitality degree, and informal education. There's people in our industry who actually have a degree. You can count them, they're just handful of them, maybe single digits or double digits, probably single digits of those who have masters, double digits of those who have maybe 15, 20% max of those who have undergrad degree in hospitality. Majority of us don't, including me, I don't have a hospitality degree. I have 2 masters, but they're outside of the industry. So, with that said, absolutely not everyone is going to decide to go to San Diego State or any other university to advance in their career in the hospitality technology. And it's not absolutely necessary to advance, your career and become successful and, contribute to the development of the industry. So it's important to consider these 2 avenues of educating people, formal education, hotel school. And there are also many different ways to raise awareness and educate outside of hospitality schools through, podcasts like this, through publishing books, articles, other forms of certifications that different organizations offer. So there are many different things that are available online and offline as well. So again, 2 separate, very different initiatives, but both of these avenues have to ensure that the content, which is again easier for non-formal education content to be adopted and upgraded faster than formal education content, just like the situation we have with brands versus independents, the same thing. But both of these, the content should be definitely timely. It can't be outdated, as we know is definitely a problem in many hotel schools right now. Curricula, they are revised every X number of years, but the X is a pretty large number. It should be smaller in my cases, in my opinion. And also there are probably not enough, in many cases, not enough real world people who contribute to those revisions. So I think there's definitely not enough attention paid to education about technology in our industry. Very few hotel schools actually have courses on hospitality technology. One would argue, why do you have to have a course on that? Because things change all the time and we have vendors come in and go. My pitch to that, which actually got me into San Diego State teaching technology, is that vendors come and go. We're not teaching how to use a specific piece of technology or a specific vendor. We're teaching the concepts. We're teaching this, what we discussed, the fragmentation of the industry, the composition of the industry. We're teaching integration dependencies, how the ecosystem looks and how it's shaped and who sits at the top, with the PMS being, kind of the center of the universe that owns the data, and how we're seeing this kind of shifting a little bit in all the, other categories of vendors and how they are dependent on that data. And that's why, PMSs have been, the kings and queens of the world and, demanding these thousands and thousands of dollars for license fees and whatnot. So all those things that our future leaders have to understand, that unfortunately majority of the industry leaders still don't understand. Like, many people, unfortunately, don't really understand how the technology ecosystem is structured, what the categories are, what the subcategories within the categories, how they're related to each other, what the trends are, how the categories are merging, and, the trend towards consolidations between different categories and, providing end-to-end solutions. So all those things, again, we need to explain to students who are going to graduate, and they're going to be decision makers when it comes to technology adoption. They're going to be working in the corporate or non-corporate environment, making buying decisions for software for these properties. So they need to understand how the world operates. And also what I noticed is that students didn't really consider career path in hospitality technology before I started introducing it to them. But there's a whole large world of, tech companies, thousands of them, startups and, older, larger companies as well, who are desperate for human resources, for people with some kind of understanding of the industry. So I'm starting to open up this tech space for my students at SDSU, for them to consider career in technology, which is a great career choice. I can, speaking from my own experience, it's not where you get yelled at the front desk of a branded hotel. This is where you can work from Bali or Singapore or Thailand at your own schedule and have unlimited vacation time. So that's the type of career that I think will be definitely something that they will consider. And many of my students are actually considering that. But I think one more comment that I want to make in terms of education is that because the technology adoption rates are accelerating and more things that we used to do manually are going to be taken on by machines. So if we take, for example, revenue management, the number crunching, aggregating data, generating reports, building, these decisions for everyday daily rates for the future 365 days ahead, those manual, boring, routine tasks are now delegated to the machines. So humans are now required to have a set of skills that are different from what they had before, have before. First of all, those are critical thinking skills. Those are very important, strategic thinking and critical thinking. And also being friendly with technology, which I think we're not going to have a problem with the new generation of people who graduate, who have these degrees. The kids, they're pretty familiar with technology and they're very comfortable with this. But it doesn't mean that you have to be, a data analyst or understand data, or you just have to be friendly with technology and friendly with reading data, reading the answers that technology gives you, and be able to make strategic decisions based on what technology gives you, based on all those number crunching that's already been done by the machine, and then holistically view the whole picture, the whole organization, and then making more strategic decisions. So, critical thinking, strategic thinking, stakeholder management, and kind of technology friendliness. I think those are the skills that are going to be essential for the future leaders of our industry.
That's a really good point. And we mentioned Max Starkov before. Having spoken to Max, I know he also believes that, one of the things that we lack in the industry currently is people with a technology skill, not, as you said, a deep knowledge of technology, but the ability to look at the operation and to look at technology and actually, put the stakeholders together and, allow technology to be used to improve the operation. We're starting to see a generation come through now, but I think more needs to be done in that sense. And I think I was quite interested to read that, the MBA that in Switzerland, that Max, MBA in hospitality technology that Max is involved with. I think, that's, as you said, what we probably need more of in the future, some technology experience.
I absolutely agree with Max on that. It's you don't have to have an engineering degree to be successful in implementing or understanding the use cases in your business that you can use technology for. I don't have an engineering degree. I have built, from the product management standpoint, I've built and brought to market multiple successful technology solutions. And what's important to understand for these students, really for anyone, you don't have to be an engineer to build a career in technology. There are so many different roles that you can apply for, that you can be absolutely qualified for, in customer service and product management, in in onboarding, in sales, very many different roles where you are not required to have engineering skills. And then from the hotel company's standpoint, again, you just have to be friendly with technology. From the end user standpoint, you don't have to have an IT skills to understand what use cases exist in your business that will be better for technology implementation, rather than using 100 people to do the same job. You can just subscribe to software and pay a few $100s a month. That will save you a lot of money, and you will be much more efficient and effective and profitable at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And, I've been lucky enough in my career to actually be able to do that. As you said, I don't have an IT degree. I actually have a Bachelor of Business in Hospitality Management, but I love technology from the onset. And I've worked in product management roles in a number of companies, taking the user's requirements and actually translating that and talking with the development team, being that interface between. And I think that's what Max is also saying that we probably need in the industry, people who can act as a bridge between the operation and technology. And that's where people like yourself as a consultant and myself actually fit in at the moment. We're actually helping hotels, take advantage of technology.
Absolutely. And just one more comment. It's interesting that you mentioned that. This is something that I realized very recently, that we in the hospitality tech world, we absolutely lack product managers with industry experience. This is something that I've been doing for 12 years. I've been doing product management, and I've been certified by a gazillion different institutes to do product management, but I'm also in the industry, which I've been for probably 20 years. So I have this combination, which is very rare, and it's very hard to find product managers who have industry experience, or industry people who have product management experience. Very logical combination that just doesn't exist, something that we are going to hopefully solve at San Diego State University. We're going to start introducing those, the courses, and so our graduates actually have the necessary experience to be qualified for product management positions at those tech companies, because I think that's definitely a very, very big gap in our industry right now. And this is the reason why the software solutions that are built, they don't really match the user's expectations because they don't understand the end user. So something that hopefully I'll be able to, not me personally, but with the help of many industry professionals, will be able to solve in the near future.
Yes, that is a really good point. That is a really good point. The next question, and I almost hate to bring it up because it gets talked about so much these days, but it is, probably the biggest issue facing the industry, and that is the labor shortage. Personally, I don't think that it's going to be solved anytime soon. Here in Australia, we're hoping that once borders are fully open, that we will have overseas workers that will help fill the gap. But having lost 40% of our industry, it's a huge gap to fill. And generally across the board, unemployment rates are extremely low here. So we're competing with other industries as well. What are your thoughts on, is it a short-term problem, a long-term problem? And how will technology help us bridge that gap?
Yeah, I watched your episode with Max, and I absolutely agree. It's not really a new problem for the industry. It has existed for a long time, and I doubt it will go away as soon as the COVID thing dissolves. Hopefully, it dissolves one day. So there are many other issues we have with our governments and immigration reforms and other policies and politics that prevent us from just solving it in one day. So I don't think it will be completely solved, but I do believe that technology absolutely can help us with that. And there have already been very many successful examples of how utilizing technology helps businesses be more efficient. I recently helped cover a story on one of the local news channels in San Diego about a restaurant that purchased robot servers. Mm-hmm. And he says that the owner says that, I love these guys. They never call in sick. They are never late. They work 24/7. He is saving something. It's a pretty small restaurant, but he was saying, I've saved $6,000 a month. It cost me $6,000 less than the labor would cost me. And it's just much more efficient and more effective and more profitable for him. So plus it's like a tourist attraction. So he's really happy with his decision. It's kind of like an edge case because we don't have to always only look at hardware to replace actual humans, not just robots replacing humans, but there's so many software solutions that can do things just so much more efficiently. Like take revenue management systems, for example. You used to have a staff of 20 dorms and you only have one left, that one dorm director of revenue management using one of the RMS systems that are on the market today manage the same amount of hotels that those 20 people used to be able to manage. Just one example, but there's so many different use cases of similar use cases where technology can help just solve the HR issue. And during the pandemic, many businesses clearly found themselves in the situation when, they only have half the staff that they had before. So it was very, very natural for them to start looking at these technology solutions. And this is clearly one of the reasons we understand, one of the main reasons why tech adoption rates started just spiking during COVID and after COVID. And tech companies actually didn't do very bad. They actually are pretty much the companies that I'm friendly with, and we kind of exchange information. They didn't lose any clients during the pandemic, as opposed to we know how many hotels closed, and it's just like situation was really bad in the industry. But when we take the tech aspect of it, especially the ones that are based on SaaS model, monthly subscription fees, they didn't really hurt much. They probably didn't grow revenue, but they were pretty stable. And again, the main reason is because many businesses, many hospitality companies turned to technology to solve these problems with labor shortage. And, you had 10 people doing something. Now you sign up for a piece of software that costs you 10 times less than the salaries of those 10 people, and then you are more efficient, more effective, more profitable, you're happy, and then others, okay, I want to be happy too, they follow. So that's kind of the chain reaction, and that's what we're seeing. And as we say, in the 2 years of the pandemic, the industry went through, 5, 7, 10 years of tech evolution. And I believe mainly because of that issue that we faced with labor. And I think that's going to continue to be the case. And that was also a positive push for many to start understanding that technology is not a foe, it's a friend. And we need to, we should trust it. It can help us. And there's just, again, so many wonderful use cases, not just with helping operating efficiencies to cover for the employees that you don't have, but also in many other areas of application where you can just tremendously benefit from it. And ROI is just, ridiculously amazing. So I think we're going to see positive trends going forward.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's still a long way to go, actually. As we said before, I'm seeing some hotel managers still, even though they've got the labor shortage, they're reticent to go down the technology route, thinking that the high touch will be lost. But I think it's inevitable that we're going to have to make change. I see too many general managers these days having to roll up their sleeves and actually, check people in. The other day I called a hotel and the financial controller was actually on the front desk, which, I've spent 30 years in the industry. I've never seen a financial controller actually checking people in on the front desk before. So it's a sign of the times. So
companies are desperate, hotels are desperate, but that just goes to show how conservative the industry is. They're willing to close half of the hotel and lose so much money instead of, putting a self-check-in kiosk at the front desk, right? It doesn't make any sense to me, again, but this is just what we're seeing because we're still a conservative industry, and there is still a lot of education to be done, in the area of technology adoption.
And that's why we're talking today. I think we need to educate the industry and let them know that, technology does not mean that you have to dispose of high touch. It can actually mean the reverse. It can free up time that the existing staff have. So if you've actually, checked in like we do with the airlines before you leave home, when you arrive at the hotel, all the paperwork is done. You just need to collect a key. You can do that from the person at the front desk. You could probably do it from a kiosk or a
machine. Yeah, you don't even need the person. You can be like, again, Citizen M. I love that use case. I use it all the time with my students. You get a barcode on your phone, you scan it, and key pops up, and you go. That's all that is needed. And one of the examples, like one of my favorite examples of very simple piece of technology that improves the high touch is Google Maps. That's everybody uses it now. But when I started my career in housekeeping, and then I moved on to the front desk, which was a big upgrade for me. I remember when I was working at the front desk, about 20 times a day, I had to answer the phone to answer how to get to my hotel. Yes. Right on Broadway, left on 6th. I'll never forget that. And so I had to do that. And I was checking in a customer. I was alone by myself at the front desk. I was checking the person in, the phone rings. I have to answer it. Right on Broadway, left on 6th. So I get distracted. The customer doesn't feel like it's a personal service. So Google Maps shows up. Nobody calls anymore. Everybody understands how to get to the hotel because it's a little simple piece of technology that just makes our lives so much more convenient. The customers are happy. They know where they're going. Front desk people are happy because they don't have to answer 20 of those calls during the day. They can provide much better customer service. Just one very little simple example, but there are, again, so many different use cases, chatbots, and more complex software systems like CRM systems and RMS and everything else that just adds to providing much better quality customer service.
Yep. Just picking up on the comment regarding Citizen M, one of the things that I think they do particularly well, and I think it's a great example of how a self-check-in kiosk or key dispenser should be deployed. They actually have ambassadors there. So if the guest is not comfortable, then there's somebody to assist them. If the guest is comfortable, those ambassadors are fully trained baristas. So those ambassadors are not there to do, what I would call the paperwork, which is what we see in a traditional front desk. I was talking to someone the other day about, we were talking about airlines and how using, either a barcode, obviously, on a printed piece of paper or your phone, you can load an aeroplane, with 300 people in 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. Yet it's not very personal or personable or hospitable, however you want to say it. Yet, when you get to a hotel, you get queues. And I said to them, great example, I was on a flight 2 weeks ago. I checked in. The flight attendant actually welcomed me by name. When I got to the hotel, I didn't get welcomed by name. It was like, I'm checking in. What's your name? Can I have your form of ID? Can I have a credit card? And can you sign here? So the actual process, to be honest, with the airline, I thought was more friendly than the actual hotel check-in. And I would have preferred to have arrived at the hotel with all of that paperwork done and just been handed a key or collected a key, as you said, via machine using a barcode. So I think technology can really, it doesn't have to be a sterile experience.
Yeah, I mean, at the point after you have spent 30 minutes waiting in line at the front desk to be checked in, I don't think you care so much about personalized service anymore. You don't want to see them again. But I think what will be really cool is when, hopefully not if, but hopefully when hotels implement the face recognition technology. When I went to Singapore last year, a couple of years ago, that was before the pandemic. It took me 5 minutes to go through TSA and onboarding and board the plane, because I didn't even have to take out my boarding pass or my passport. I just went through a few machines that just scanned my face. They knew who I was. So one day, hopefully this will happen. I'm sure that there are probably already hotels in Asia somewhere that implement that technology.
Yes, it's in China there are some as well, of course. Alibaba's Flizhou Hotel has that technology. I think there is still some concerns over privacy certainly in countries like Australia, but you're quite right. When you leave Australia, from an immigration point of view, it is all done now on facial recognition, and it just streamlines that process so much. It really, I think people are happy to use the technology because it's so convenient and actually has a benefit for them.
Yeah. I think very soon we will be divided by, into countries that have a seamless check-in process, 5-minute check-in process, and those who are concerned about privacy. So it's their choice where they want to be in terms of technology adoption. I mean, privacy is important, but this technology exists everywhere. I mean, face recognition is already, like, our data is out there, but that's a whole separate discussion.
Obviously, the metaverse is a big topic at the moment. I think, obviously Facebook changing the name in October last year brought that to the forefront. But, I'll just describe it briefly. I mean, the metaverse is basically a virtual reality that's going to merge social media, augmented reality, virtual reality, and online gaming and cryptocurrency. So really, it's the next step of the internet, and it's going to provide an interconnected and decentralized environment for us. I've been doing a little bit of reading of late. I'm struggling a little bit with how, in a sense, the metaverse will help hotels, because when I think of hotels, we actually provide guests with an experience. But then by the same token, it brought me back to thinking about Kodak and how their original philosophy was, we help people capture memories. And when they invented the digital camera, they buried that. The person who invented it took it to his manager. They took it to higher up the management, and they, showed them, and they're like, oh, if this gets out, then the film industry, which is where we make all our money, will be decimated. So please, hide that. If they had have considered that their core value was actually to help people capture moments, they would have actually continued on that. So it makes me think that the metaverse potentially has a place for hotels. What are your thoughts on the metaverse and NFTs, which are obviously, non-fungible tokens, which are how would you describe them? Really, a digital asset which can't be replicated, and they're recorded on blockchain. so that the buyer has proof of ownership. And I think I've heard, obviously, we could be using them for customer loyalty in the future in hotels, and heaven forbid we could be using them as room keys, jumping the need for mobile keys. So there's a lot happening in that space. How quickly do you think hotels will adopt? And it should I suppose a question in summary is it something that hotels should be looking at now to get a basic understanding, or should they be jumping on board?
It's a very interesting topic. That is definitely, there are a few buzzwords that you mentioned that everybody's talking about, that kind of the discussion has been mainly triggered by Facebook, renaming their company, because these things have existed for many years, but suddenly they became, everybody's the center of attention. It's an interesting story that you mentioned about Kodak. I think it's a similar story, the situation with Blockbuster and Netflix. Kind of a similar lack of vision, I guess. Definitely, my personal opinion, this is the type of technology that is definitely is already very important to pay attention to. And there is a lot of potential for it in our lives, not just hospitality industry, but in our lives. But as we discussed in the beginning of this conversation, the reason why I named my book Hospitality 2.0, not 3.0, is because you understand why, right? We're just not there yet.
Yep.
The good news is that you probably don't remember the very first page of my book. There is a quote that the future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed. So I believe that there will be, always have been, and always will be players in our industry who will be ahead of the curve. And most likely those are going to be smaller companies, because it's just easier for them, and newer companies, clearly, because it's just easier for them to adapt to the evolution of technology and implement these new cool technologies for their use cases. But there are actually quite a few very interesting areas of application of these things that you mentioned: blockchain, metaverse, AR, VR, XR, all those buzzwords that are used right now. I wouldn't concentrate just on, the use case of staying at the hotel. I don't think that's going away. People will still travel and stay at hotels. It's still going to be needed, just helps build memories. But there are many use cases in our industry outside of just, typical hotel stay, where this technology might definitely help. Kind of the main area is meeting and events. These technologies have been penetrating this aspect of our industry for quite a few years now. Again, this technology is not new. It wasn't built yesterday. It's been years since we started adopting it. And the so-called hybrid events are very popular now, where people who prefer to be in person, which I'm one of them, I prefer to go to this meeting and interact with people and build meaningful connections, because I have converted myself from an introvert to an extrovert, and I finally learned how to speak to people from speaking to just my computer. So people like me, they will embrace in-person communications, and they will get on the plane and travel 18 hours to Bangkok to a conference. But there will also be people, and have always been, who either are unable to attend, or they don't have enough funds, or their companies are not allowing and they're not covering the budget, or whatever reasons. So that use case, I think, is going to be more and more prominent. I don't think, just like with any other technology, it's not going to replace what we have already. It's going to add and build on top of what we've had in terms of, in-person experiences. It's just going to complement it. Other use cases are in training, how we train employees.
Yes.
There are different ways of using this technology to communicate the knowledge to new hires, instead of having humans do it all the time now, because we don't have any humans to do it anymore. In education, how we educate our students, and how we teach people in the industry, how we, again, communicate knowledge to them. In engagement of travelers before their stay,
Yes.
they would be able to, walk through the hotel and see where the pool is, see where the meeting room is. This is where the front desk is going to be. Or if it's a meeting planner, they will be able to see the plan of the building and understand, okay, where the guests are going to be coming through. So those are just some example of the use cases. And blockchain technology, one of the use cases I think that is very exciting to me is allowing us to manage the data privacy situation and the transfer of personal data from the consumer to the building or to the business.
Yep.
Sharing that data between the consumer, the traveler, and the hotel. And also from the other aspect is sharing ARI data from the business to the consumer and to intermediaries. And that's the ARI data sharing right now is a big problem in the industry, and a lot of it is manual file data processing, especially when it comes to GDS technologies. They're very old. So there are companies that are already offering solutions that will completely modernize and reinvent this ARI data sharing between hotels, businesses, and the end consumer, the traveler, without having to do this heavy lifting of data file processing. So I think that's where that technology will help us decentralize that data to solve the data privacy issue. Again, many wonderful, amazing, promising use cases out there.
Yeah.
However, with this small amount of industry is going to adopt them in the beginning. We're going to go through this evolution curve, technology adoption curve, which looks like this inverted U shape, whatever you call it.
Bell curve.
The bell curve thing. It's going to happen gradually. There will be early adopters. There are already companies that are successfully doing that in our space.
Yep.
Majority of the industry will be lagging behind, and hopefully they will start with adopting cloud solutions, getting rid of their DOS-based PMS,
yep.
And then moving on to using AI, ML, and then maybe someday, if they don't go out of business and by being disrupted, maybe they will implement AR, VR, blockchain, and metaverse, and other wonderful things that we're discussing.
That's true. We do need to learn to crawl before we start walking. So
Exactly. Before we use the Tesla, we have to learn to crawl.
Yes, that's right.
We're not even talking about bicycle right now. We're talking about crawling.
That's right. Very last question, and I like to call it, in a sense, the $1 million question. So if you were given $1 million and free reign to do anything now with regards to the industry, maybe develop some software or even develop a training course or whatever, what would you focus on?
I would ask for more, but if I only have one, I would start building a new generation revenue management solution. Okay. Revenue management is my original passion. I have been leaning towards technology more, kind of general applications of it outside of just revenue management, but this is kind of how I started my career. I've been working with many RMS systems and again, building my own. And I'm very aware of all solutions on the market. And I wanted to publish a book on how to build a new generation RMS, but I don't know if I'll be able to do that because I'm already working on another one.
So 3.0? No.
That one is, I can't disclose, but it's going to be a very cool one. It's going to be a really good book, I think. So I think what we are missing in the RMS space, and again, there are many wonderful solutions, but I think what they're lacking, all of them are actually true concentrating and targeting bottom line profits, like the true maximization of the bottom line instead of just looking at top line room revenue, including properly measuring distribution expenses, which is a very, very big issue right now in the industry. There is just like not enough technology and not enough standardization in terms of data transfer to achieve that optimally. So we'll do that. Plus, it has to be a solution that also takes into account all revenue streams, not just the room revenues, but definitely all, total revenue and everything else, and be able to. And there are some solutions that already offer that aspect. but it has to be a comprehensive solution that does it all. And also it has to be a solution that allows for collaboration between departments at the property or in the company, including marketing, sales, operations and finance and whatnot. So they have functionality to collaborate and make sure that they all target the same metric, which is the bottom line profit. As we know, have been working in silos for decades, and they all doing their own thing. One is targeting room nights, another one is targeting RevPAR. The owner cares about cash flow, but nobody else really does. So it has to be a collaborative solution, and it wouldn't be called a revenue management system. It would be called profit optimization system or solution or whatnot, something that would allow for comprehensive management or an optimization of all your revenue streams and the entire cost structure of the property to make sure that the whole entire company works as an organism together, towards the same goal. This solution does not yet exist, but I truly hope that one day I will see that happen. If there is an investor out there that has $1 million, reach out. I have built a few, and I have many ideas. And kidding, but not kidding, really, I always look for new things to get myself into. And things that make me excited is building software that hotels use and are happy with is something that is very, very addictive. And I've been doing that for 12 years, and I would like to continue doing that.
That's amazing. I think that's actually an absolutely fantastic idea. And as you said, it will revolutionize the industry. At the moment, we operate in silos. As you said, sales have one focus, which is room nights. Revenue managers looking, at RevPAR, but looking at overall profitability. And I think there's money being left on the table at the moment with hotels in upsells and incremental revenue. The airline industry, I hate to say it again, but they're showing us the way. I think statistically, is something like 34% of airline revenue actually comes from indirect incremental sales.
Interesting.
And they have, compared to hotels, they have so little opportunity. Hotels have so much more. We have spas that we could sell independently, but we unfortunately, I think as an industry, often we focus too much on room nights. So yes, we'll sell the spa to the guest who's actually staying with us. I think there are lots of opportunities there. So
absolutely.
Ira, I've really just thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Hospitality 2.0 was a great book. I can't wait for the next one. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed it and hope to stay in touch. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Ira.